First of all, let's go to this demo scene of the art pack that we got. Come on, Unity. Nice. All right. And let's find ourselves a unit that we're going to take and bring to life. Okay, does this have a unit actually? Other units in this demo scene? This says battle, barracks, tree. I'm not sure if this demo scene has units. Okay, let's look at the models. Oh, there's a character here. Character archer, character swordsman, and character worker. You know what? I think the character worker is the one that we're going to use. So okay, let's go back to let's go back to our main scene. Right. Maybe let's make sure things are already, working. Nothing has changed since last time, but let's see how long also Unity takes now in order to start this scene. All right. Amazing stuff. Oh, okay. I have actually apparently imported the updates into this project because either that or I have manually modified it to work. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I've fixed it over here and then moved the fix into the RTS Engine, and for the RTS Engine package I simply made like a new script for that. For some of you who are on the Discord server and read the release notes, it's like the entity colored renderer script, but in here it's working within the faction entity thing. All right, that's good. That's really nice. All right, so let's go ahead and create our unit. We go to the top bar menu, we select the RTS Engine editor, we can drag it down here, and then we make sure that we are in the units tab, and we just click on create new unit. We're just gonna call this one worker, start, and then we'll just give it the code live worker and a category for civilian unit. And you can see here that the villager is from the demo game is a civilian unit, so we can see the categories here. And in the description, this is a test worker unit. Can you share your PC characteristics? Well, I'm too embarrassed to share my PC characteristics, so probably not. How hard is it to change what the game UI looks like? It's actually not that hard when you... So this is the UI, this is the default UI that comes with the RTS Engine. And the whole UI system is actually a module. So when we go to the RTS Engine here, we go to modules, we can see we have a folder called basic UI. And in this basic UI, you have the scripts that are handling all of the UI stuff. And they all rely on listening to events that are firing from the RTS Engine components, the main components, and then they are updating their content depending on those events. So you can literally just like delete this folder here and you won't have any problem running the RTS Engine, but then you'll have to create your own UI and work on that. And if you go to modules here under basic UI, you can look at all of the scripts at the moment that are handling the UI. So each script is dedicated to something specific. We can see the single selection panel here is what is displayed when a unit or a building or a resource is selected. And when you go to something like the faction entity count. This one is for displaying the count of unique or the types of the faction entities that you have. And we have a pending task panel handler, which shows what, for example, if you have a building that is creating units and it's creating units on a timer, it will show that timer to you. And so you can customize the UI as much as you want. You can start from these scripts and then extend them. You can keep some of these scripts, you can add your own, or you can delete the whole thing and just program the UI yourself when taking a look at the API and understanding how the RTS Engine components are firing events. But yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Otherwise, we're gonna go back to the RTS Engine editor since we're creating our new unit here. Let's close this down. And yeah, we set the description to a test worker unit. We can also set the icon to whatever we want. So maybe we can set it to the one from the demo game. We set that here. And then we click on finalize creation. We wait for Unity to do its magic. And then we go under resources, prefabs, and we find our unit prefab. When we double click on it, it's just a simple capsule unit. All right, first of all, let's bring all of this here to, let's organize this project a little bit. Create some folders for unit extension, and then we'll bring this right here. Okay, so we have under unit extension, we have our prefabs and then live worker. Alrighty. Now that we have our unit prefab created, let's take a look at the main unit components and set up this unit. So these fields here we just set up in the RTS Engine editor. We can see here that we have a model for the unit. This is the basic capsule model. And what we want to do here is bring our own model that we saw earlier, the character worker. Yes, this one. And yeah, it's reset 0, 0, 0. Yeah, and let's go ahead and remove this one and drag and drop our new model into its corresponding field. Click save. Let's go and take a look at the faction entity tab. So the main entity or the faction locked, we explained those in more details when we were creating the building. So we don't want this to be a main entity. We don't want this to be faction locked for now. The init and disable resources, we still don't have resource types set up. That's gonna be in a future part in this live series. So we're gonna keep those empty for now. And for the colored renderers, we see there's one element here which was attached to the renderer of the capsule that we just deleted. So now we're just gonna replace that with this new unit. And we're gonna go ahead and find a renderer, which is this one, the skinned mesh renderer. We're gonna look at the materials. It only has one material. And yeah, we're gonna manipulate this color here. So, which is gonna be set to the faction color. Alrighty, warrior worker. One material, so we keep the material ID at 0. Maybe we play with, making it a little bit dark, but we don't want it to be any transparent. And in the newest version of the RTS engine, we actually have a separate component that allows us to handle the colored renderers. But it basically does the same thing. It has the same field, but it's on a separate component, so it's not really, you can have it or not have it. It's not like a requirement, unlike here. I mean, you can also keep this one empty, but just for more modularity, we have it on a different component. And then to the units tab, the spawn look at field is something that is used for units that are placed in the map by default. And what I mean by that is not the units that are created during runtime or when the game is running. For these units, or you can, you can only set it for units that are initially placed in the map. And so when you want them to spawn, they would be like looking at a certain transform at a certain position in the map. But for us, this is irrelevant, so we'll keep it unset here. All right. Now we move to the unit health script, and we start with the general tab. We can give our unit maybe 200 health points, and it starts with those 200 health points. So we can maximally have 200, and we start with 200. We can increase the health, decrease it. This unit can be attacked. It doesn't have a specific attack target position, even though we can set one. So maybe let's say an enemy archer shoots an arrow, it will be targeted at its center. But instead we can, for example, create an object and set it in the chest of this unit, so all of the arrows would go to the chest. The hover health bar data. So what we could do here is, for example, create an empty object, reset it, and let's imagine where we want the hover health bar data to be. So when we have the health bar on top of this unit to tell us how much health it has, maybe something like 275. So we take that, delete this object here, and we just go and get, 275 for our offset, because it will be spawned in the actual position of the unit, and then we add that offset to it. And for its size, we just keep it 111. And if you remember, for the building that we created, the town center, we actually had a bigger health bar data, health bar size, just to indicate that it's a building, and in comparison to units, we're just gonna keep them uniform to 111. Hit effect, we still haven't gone through the effect objects, so we'll leave that there. The hit audio, nothing here. And when we check this option, stop moving on damage, we make the unit stop its current movement when it gets damaged by an enemy unit. But for us, we don't want this option. We're gonna keep it disabled. We want the unit to be destroyed when it reaches 0 health. We want the destroy to happen immediately, so 0 for the delay time here. Destroy award allows us to award the faction that killed the entity to have certain resources given to it. Haven't gone to resources yet, so we'll keep it like that. And the destruction effect and the audio clip we can set here. For the health states, we also went very in details with the health states when it comes to buildings, which also have different additional states for the construction and post-construction states. And here we only have states during the lifetime of the unit and then states during the destruction phase. But we're not gonna have anything special here. We're just gonna keep them disabled. So for the health states of the unit, we're not gonna assign anything here. When the unit is dead, we're probably gonna assign a simple animation to it. And here in the debug tab, we will usually see the current health of the unit inputted there. And this debug tab will have more fields attached to it in the future, hopefully. So yeah, stay tuned. Alrighty, now that we are done with the unit health, we can now move to the unit animator right after I have a sip of water. Yeah, so this is the unit animator controller component, which handles all things animation for the unit. So we can see here our animator is assigned to the prefab parent of this unit, which we probably don't want to. We're gonna see how the worker character has its animator. So first of all, we're gonna start by removing this animator, and now we have to assign a new one. So we go to our character walker. Oh, and we find that it already has an animator, so that's awesome. We simply drag and drop that object, so it assigns the animator here. And for the animator override controller, what we want to assign here is a new animator. I was going to assign the one from the demo game, but I just thought it will not be correct since that one has different animations. So we probably have to create a new animator override controller, because when we go here, runtime animator controller, all right, let's check out the animator. Let's go to the RTS Engine core and then animation, and then take a look at the controllers. So we have our animator here. This is the animator that all of the RTS Engine units use. So it has these states: idle, moving, in progress, take damage, and then dead. And it also has these parameters and all of these relationships between the different states. And this is what the unit animator controller script recognizes as the animation states. And so we need an animator component that works with this controller. So the first thing we're going to do is drag and drop this animator, so the unit animator, into this field here. Click save. So now we make sure that we have our animator assigned, and our animator works with the unit animator assigned and created by the RTS engine. Now let's go to the unit extension and let's create a folder where we can organize our units. Let's create a folder for our worker, and in this folder we're going to create a animator override controller, and we're gonna call this one live worker animator override. So in each animator we have these states, and you can see here that all of these states have animations assigned to them, but all of the animations are called as the names start with empty. So empty in progress animation, empty take damage animation, empty movement animations. And the reason behind this is that we want our units to have the same animator controller, but then we want our units to use different animations, and for that we use an animator override controller. And the override controller doesn't have states of its own. It just allows us to pick an animator controller, and then we can replace the empty animation clips with the animations that we're going to assign for each of our units. So the idea behind this is that instead of having to recreate a new animator controller for each unit, because they're all going to be the same at the end of the day, since we have the same unit animator controller component, we're just going to have one, which is given to you by the RTS engine, and it has empty animations, and then you're just going to override these empty animations assignments. All right, so our live worker animator override, we're going to go back to our unit animator controller here, drag and drop this into this field here to assign it as our default animator override controller. And what we want to do here is now assign the animations. And for that, we have to go to our asset pack and folder animations. I think we can see a preview of these now. Should be able to see a preview, yes. So this is an attack animation, for example, which looks like he's building something. Honestly, I don't see how that's an attack animation. Yeah, okay, this is a build animation. Run and walk. All right, for now, what we want, actually, there is no death animation. All right, no problem. Invincible unit. All right, let's close this Animator tab. And now let's go back to our Animator override controller. We're gonna lock this over here so we can easily not lose that inspector view. Go back here, here. We're gonna go ahead and drag the walk animation into the empty movement animation there, and the idle one into its respective field. Click save. All good. Now when we go back to our live worker, we can continue looking at the other fields of the unit animator controller, which we have damage animations, and in this case we are able to choose whether we want the damage animation to appear or not. And if we do, we have to enable this field, and then we assign the duration assigned for that animation clip that we're going to use for taking damage. And in that case, no other animation will be played until that duration is through. For us, we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to have this disabled. As for the other components of the unit on the main parent prefab, we have an audio source, which allows our entity components to play audio clips from this unit, and then we have a NavMesh Agent. This NavMesh Agent is required to have the unit walk on the navigation mesh, Unity's navigation mesh pathfinding system. For now, we're just gonna keep it disabled here, and we're gonna go back to it when we handle the unit movement. But it's worth mentioning probably at this point is that each entity in the RTS engine, like we saw with the buildings, has a certain radius which defines the interaction limit for that unit or any entity. That's how it enters an interaction with other entities, and we cannot assign this directly from the unit component, but we can assign it here from the NavMesh agent. So when we change this to 0.25 or 0.5, it's not gonna reflect here immediately, but when we start the game, it's gonna be reflected there. So yeah, keep this disabled for now. We're gonna go back to it a little bit later. Now onto the unit selection. This is a regular selection component. So unit selection as a child object of our unit prefab. We have one selection collider, which is highlighted by the green gizmo here. We make sure that it's active, and we allow anyone to select the entity, not just like the faction that it owns it. And for now, we don't have a an audio clip that we can assign for the selection, and we'll keep this empty. We're gonna move to the selection collider right here. We see that it has the required entity selection collider component, and it's attached to this unit selection colliders field. But since it's not fitting for our unit, let's go ahead and modify this a little bit. So let's make sure. All right. So I think probably the width and the height is probably, yeah, 0.9 might be nicer. And maybe another 0.9 here, or even less, yeah. And then for the height, we're gonna have to do some adjustments, maybe 2, and then we give it this one. And yeah, I think this should work. So now whenever the player, I think We should probably make this a little bit less and then move it maybe a little bit. 0.05, yeah, awesome. All right, so now that we have our selection collider, whenever the player clicks on this collider, it's gonna select our unit. And we make sure that its trigger is set to false, even though it's gonna be overridden to false, even if it wasn't. But yeah, and now we have our selection renderer. So this is a game object that is activated whenever this entity associated to it is selected. We are gonna keep the same size for this, I think. We can try to have it a little bit smaller and see if that fits. And I think smaller actually is better. Well, you heard it here first. Yeah, we are. Yeah, let's have this size. This is nicer. All right, so this is the entity selection renderer, which is just a visual effect, something that appears that, you know, indicates to the player that, hey, this unit is selected. And it has a mesh renderer, and this mesh renderer has a color, which will then be colored with the faction color right here. Now we're just going to keep it white. And it has the renderer and the material associated to the renderer that you want to color assigned here. So material ID 0, we only have one material in the array. Index 0, boom. All right, we have our renderer, selection renderer and collider set up. Now to the movement part, which is the final part of setting up our entity. All right. I wonder whether I should be starting with the movement manager or with the unit movement component. Let me think about this a little bit. Maybe I can look at how I'm actually doing it in the documentation. Alright, so in the documentation I actually go through the unit movement component, the NavMesh agent, and then finally the movement manager. So I'm just gonna follow that order. Since apparently I thought about it before and that made sense. Yeah. We're gonna start with the unit movement script. So this is an entity component which should have a unique code. So we're just gonna call it unit movement for here. Just make sure that no other entity component has the same code, so it's uniquely identified by our system. We make sure that it's active, and this priority here determines which entity component that can have a target, like the movement component can have another entity or a position in the map as a target. The entity component with the lowest value in this priority field will be the one that is prioritized when we click with the right mouse button on a position in the map or an entity in the map. That's what it's gonna look at first. Is the target valid? If yes, then choose that script. If not, then we're gonna go to the component that is next into the priority. Alright, I actually just came up with an idea for some nice quality of life updates, so let me just write this down. Probably will be nice to have a certain menu or visual stuff in the editor that allows you to see, which components that allow to have targets are now prioritized before the others. So an overview of the entity components visually will be very nice, I think. So I'm gonna just write it down right here. Where is my Google Doc that I write these random ideas in? All right, here it is. That shows entity components and target components organized by their priorities. Nice. All right. Now back to the unit movement. So this is the general tab fields. Now take a look at setting up a target. Here we can define a task that will appear on the task panel when this unit is selected. And when we click on this task, we can click on any position or any entity in the map and the unit will move there. So this is the set target of the unit movement component task. We can use some of the tasks from the demo game. We can search for them, set target movement. Yeah, so we can use this one right here. And we can take a look at this asset file. Each task UI is represented by a scriptable object that we can create in the RTS engine, and we can then assign the data of this task UI, what is the description of it, what's the icon of it, and then we can drag and drop it into its field, and it's gonna appear when the unit is selected. But let me take a look at the unit movement here. All right, setting the target. All right, for now, we're probably gonna leave the creation of the set of the entity component task UI asset in another part of this tutorial, and we're just gonna be happy with setting the one from the demo game. Before moving on there, we also have an audio clip that we can assign whenever we command the unit to move to a certain place. It can reply with, yes sir, or right on it, or something like that, whatever audio clip that you want. We can have multiple ones, and then we can have a different mode of actually playing these clips. We can have a random clip played each time, making sure that there's no repetition each time. We can play some stuff in order, a lot of customization for y'all. Now moving on to the movement tab. The movement tab is pretty much the main tab of the unit movement component. And right here, we assign what terrain areas that the unit is allowed to move on. So we went through creating the terrain areas, and I remember we created one dedicated for our demo game here. We called it live demo ground, and we're gonna assign it here to make sure that our unit is only movable on terrain objects that are defined for this terrain area. As for the formation of the units, the RTS engine comes with two formations that are pre-created, and those two are the circular formation and the row formation. The circular formation, simply when you have multiple units selected and you want to move them, they will all circle around the target position. And for the row formation, you have units moving into a row formation, in terms of lines. For the circular formation, we have properties that are defined, either float properties or int properties, but for this formation we only have spacing, which defines how much space in that circle will each unit have further away from the other unit in the circle when moving together in this formation. So we can probably maybe set the spacing to like 0.2 or something, so we make sure that the units are not, like near each other like that. Yeah. For the properties here, we are gonna take a look later how the RTS engine recognizes this property through these formations through the movement manager and its subcomponents. But for now, it's suffice to say that we select one of the formations and then we assign the properties regarding that formation. So for example, if we select the row formation here, we can see that we have new properties like the amount per row. We have, the same space and formation, but we also have two different spacing fields for the vertical and horizontal spacings. We can have different ones there. Otherwise, we're just gonna be sticking for the circular formation here. The movement priority. So the lower this value is, the more units of this type will be prioritized when generating the path destination. So imagine here a case where we have many units selected, 30 units selected, and they have different types. And we want to prioritize certain units to be at the front when we move all of these units together. So imagine these units are infantry and then archer units. Logically, we want, when we move all of them to a certain location to attack an enemy, for example, we want the infantry units to be on the front lines and the archer units to be on the back lines. So we play with this value in order to get what we get here. For now, for the worker units, we probably are just gonna keep this 0 since we don't have any other units created, and yeah, we don't really, this is irrelevant at the moment. The movement of speed. So this is how fast the unit moves. We can change this to something like 6. Maybe we can do some tests later with how the animation feels that we just assigned earlier for the movement state. And then we can adjust this properly. The acceleration of the unit. This is how fast the unit gets from its, idle state where it has 0 speed to the actual maximum speed. For this, we can just make sure that, okay, the unit starts walking immediately since we don't have an intermediary state between idle and stopping. So we just, have this set to something crazy like 999. So it just starts working immediately. The movement audio is the audio that the unit plays in a loop when it's moving. So imagine we have a horse unit. It just moves and it makes horse sounds, something like that. And the invalid path audio, this is if you try to move the unit to a place that it's not able to draw a path at. You can play an audio clip which serves as a feedback to the player that, hey, I cannot really move there, All right, the rotation tab. The rotation tab is, we have fields here handling all things rotation for the unit when it's moving. We can assign the angular speed of the unit, how fast does the unit rotate from, during its path. We can have this set to something high as well so that it rotates immediately. We make sure that this field is enabled so that the unit can move while rotating. But if you have something like a type of unit that can only rotate or move, so then you deselect this option so that whenever it has to rotate during its path, it stops moving, it rotates, it continues moving. And this is an option for the unit being able to idly rotate or not. So imagine the unit is looking at some other unit or following another unit that is just without actually having to move, and it keeps looking at it, so it keeps rotating while it is in idle position. And we keep this option enabled, and in this case we can have maybe a slower rotation speed when the unit is stopping, so something like 2 would work here. But yeah, play with these settings as much as you want so you can get a feel for whatever type of game that you're going for. And the debug tab here is a tab that allows us to see what is going on with this unit component when it's actively running, and we'll keep this. We'll maybe take a look at this later when we have the unit running and see how it's working. Alrighty. Now let's move to the NavMesh Agent controller. So the RTS Engine, it supports different navigation solutions like the Unity's pathfinding system, but and the A-star Pathfinder project. But for each pathfinding solution, we need to have specific scripts that are like connectors between those assets and the RTS Engine asset. And in this case, if we're using the Unity's NavMesh system, we need to have a NavMesh Agent controller attached to the same object that the unit movement is attached to. That's a requirement. Here it doesn't have any fields, but it just tells the unit movement that, hey, we're using Unity's navigation mesh system. And on this note, we go back to our live worker where we have the NavMesh Agent. This component is not an RTS Engine component. It's, Unity's NavMesh system component. And we can only have it at the main parent object of the unit, so that when it's moving, it moves all of the unit together with all of its children objects. Because if we were to have it in the unit movement child object, it will only keep moving that object, which is an empty object, and then everything else will stay put, which we don't want. So we're gonna have it here. And as for these settings, you can take a look at the Unity's documentation page for this component. But what is actually important to us here is, as we said earlier, the radius of the unit that is defined here, as well as having this quality set to none, because we probably don't want to use Unity's navigation system obstacle avoidance. This is also a topic right now in the Discord server. We're looking for a nice asset with good obstacle avoidance so we can use it. Also looking for something deterministic, or probably gonna have to build something of that on my own, but yeah, we'll see about that. That was off topic, but going back onto topic, we just keep this set to none for now, and we look at the radius of our unit, and we make sure that it's something that covers its model. So 0.5 here works wonders, and we can also adjust the height and have it set at 2, and this will be perfect for this model here. All right, as I said, we also make sure that it is allowed on walkable on the walkable area mask. I mean, you can also keep it here because we're not gonna use the not walkable or the jump areas, but it's a good idea to have it set to the walkable areas. And why that works is when we go to our live demo terrain area, we set the navigation areas associated to this ground terrain are the ones that have index 0. And so when we go to our navigation tab, we can look at the areas and we see that the walkable area here has index 0. It's the first built-in area, and that is what we have in our terrain area assigned here. So back to the NavMesh agent, goes without saying that this is a humanoid. And as for the speed, the angular speed, the acceleration, the stop and distance, all of these settings right here will be overridden by what we set here in the rotation and the movement tab. So we don't need to do anything else here besides setting our obstacle avoidance turned off, and then the radius and the height of the unit. So that's great. All right. Now we have everything set up for this unit. One thing is probably missing though, which is the essential component that will handle the movement of the units. And that is the movement manager. So when we go to game manager essential, under movement, we find the movement manager component right here. I'm gonna take all of these components one by one. So for the movement manager, this field is the stop and distance. So when does the unit reach its destination by this distance, it stops and it's marked as, okay, destination reached. We have an effect object that appears whenever we assign a movement target for a unit, which we will see later when we're doing testing, and we'll get back to when we're doing effect objects. Otherwise, we also need to tell the movement manager that, hey, we're using Unity's navigation pathfinding solution, and so we drag and drop our NavMesh movement system into this field. And yeah, so the movement manager would recognize what pathfinding solution we're using. It also has no fields, so that's good. And as for the formation handlers, we have to tell the movement manager which formation types are allowed in the game. And as we said, we have only two types of formations at the moment, row and circular. And these formations, for each script, we assign the formation type that is associated with it. And this script here is the one that is actually making the calculations on the path destinations whenever, one of the formation types is assigned. And we also have the option to have a fallback formation. So for example, if we cannot generate path destinations using a formation, we can have a fallback one, and then its handler will be responsible for generating the path destination. You can see here the row formation handler has the circular one as a fallback, but the circular one does not have any fallback. So if we don't find any positions with the circular one, we just stop when we say, hey, we're not able to move into that position. All right. So now let's go ahead and bring our unit into the scene. Unit extension, resources, prefab, and let's drag and drop it right there. Gonna have it here. Let's go ahead and remove this unit. Now we have our live worker. We're gonna go ahead in the game manager and drag and drop this here. We will also be removing the villager that we used last time from the demo game. Keep this at 2. Let's go ahead and start the game. Waiting for Unity to do its stuff. Yeah, alright. We can select our unit and it's moving. It is actually moving. Alright. It's also like taking quite some time to rotate, which I don't like. I want to make it rotate immediately because it looks like it's moving and rotating at the same time. So we go back to the unit movement, we go back to rotation, and then we set this to something crazy like na. Let's go ahead and play the game again. Select our units. Let's zoom in. Oh yeah, alright. It's slightly better, but still the angular speed, the idle angular speed. It's taken a little bit long to rotate maybe. Maybe we can look at settings from the other units. Where is our villager unit? Yeah, this one. Let's look at the unit movement here. Oh, okay. So that might have to be All right. So in the beginning, that it seems to be the idle movement, the idle speed when it's moving, and that is probably something that needs to be investigated. Maybe there's something, maybe the NavMesh is still using the idle angular speed. Let me write this down. Investigates idle angular speed low at angular speed high, still not responding. All right, let's go ahead and now play the game again. All right. No, it was actually working as expected. Okay. All right, that's good. We can also see that, you know, our villager has this blue shirt now instead of the default color for the shirt. And yeah, it's the same color as the building right here. So that's amazing. Otherwise, I'm not sure, but I think, do you guys think that the model for the unit is a little bit bigger than, is too big for the building? Or is that just me? Am I seeing this wrong here? Okay, let me see, 1 second. I mean, it's not really that big of a problem. Our unit is alive and it's moving. That's all we care about at the moment. All right. For the people watching, do you guys have any questions about the unit creation? Anything specific you want to see? While I take another sip of water. Alrighty. All right. Maybe right now we can work on adding a movement task. Since we're still in this, you know, movement flow, we can go ahead and add a new UI task for the movement. So maybe we can start with a introduction for the UI of the task panel, or the components that actually manage this. The first component is the task manager, which you will find under the essential components under game manager. And this component right here has two different sections. The first section here is for awaiting tasks, and awaiting tasks are the tasks that appear in the task panel when an entity is selected, and when you click on them, they allow you to then click with the left mouse button on a target that will be set. So for our movement, we will have a task that we can click on, and then we can click anywhere in the map and the unit will move there. We can assign an icon for this task and also assign a cursor that when we have this option enabled here, it will allow us to override the default cursor and it will show the icon that we're using. So we're gonna keep this enabled and we're gonna show that later. And since we changed the mouse cursor, we need to have a custom default cursor, which is the one that we use from the demo game. So we're gonna keep that as well. Otherwise, this is the tasks queue, which this key allows, this control type here allows to define a key that we can hold down and then make the unit assign different tasks to the unit that will not be immediately taken or done, but they will be added into a queue. But we will get back to this some other time. So yeah, this is the main component that is essential for our handling the awaiting tasks. And then let's look at the UI components that actually facilitate this the drawing of these tasks. So for UI, we only have two components, two main components here that are essential. Whatever UI system that you want to use, we have a UI manager and then we have a game UI text display manager. So the UI manager is just something that connects the UI components that are part of the optional module with the RTS engine, and it has some general methods that can be accessible by UI components. But the more interesting one is the game UI text display manager, which allows everything that is text that is shown in the UI elements gets passed through this manager first with a lot of overridable dedicated methods for a lot of cases. And you can override this component and assign your own here and see how the text is used and shown into the screen. So this is done because I wanted in the future to have a module where you can have multi-language support, and having all of the text shown in the UI pass through one component is essential for that. So you can even, instead of writing a description for a unit, for example, you write a certain code, and that certain code is given to the game UI display manager, and then that will look up, okay, which language the player is using, and then it will simply take the correct description using that code and then display it on the UI. But yeah, this is probably something for the future. Besides these two UI components, we have our basic UI. And in the basic UI, let's set this to 2D. Let's take a look at the task panel, which is, yeah, this is the one that you want to take a look at. So the task panel here, in short, is the component that handles displaying our tasks. And we can see here in the hierarchy, we have a task panel right here, and it has different categories. This is the task panel from the demo game. It has 4 different categories for displaying the tasks. So we have unit creation, and then the building tasks, the upgrade, and unit military task panel, and then we have an extra task panel, and then we have some miscellaneous stuff. And all of these here are grid layout groups, so when we add elements, they are organized into, you know, the cell sizes, and spacing is defined here. But back to our task panel UI handler, and let's take a look at the categories. So the categories we just saw in the hierarchy are all assigned here as the parent objects. So whenever a task is requested to be shown, it's gonna be like, hey, what's its category? And then depending on its category, it's gonna be added to a different category right here, and for each element here we assign the parent, and then we can assign a pre-created amount. So handling with UI in Unity is a little bit expensive, so sometimes it is advisable to have everything pre-created, because we don't want to instantiate stuff when the game is running that's gonna make the FPS take a hit for a frame. And so we want to have some pre-created stuff that the RTS engine will just deactivate and only show when there's a task that needs to be shown. We can also choose a UI prefab that will be the one that is pre-created and used to show tasks. We can have a dedicated prefab, a different one for each category, or we can simply use the one assigned for for all categories. So if a category element here doesn't have a task UI prefab assigned, it's gonna use the default one assigned here. And as we can see here, we have different pre-created amounts for each category, and we have an option here called disable for slot, which we're gonna see in a minute that we can when we define a task, we can make it force itself into a specific slot into the category, but we can disable this functionality directly from the category, so that option when we create the task UI element is not really is irrelevant, becomes irrelevant. But we're gonna keep all of these disabled for now, because if we have a task that forces its slot index, we're gonna keep it like that. As for the other option here is it's called redirecting the category IDs. So in specific cases, and this has been done in the mobile controls module, we needed an option to allow the same categories, for example, that were used in the PC demo game to be used in the mobile controls, but it had different categories assigned in the mobile one. So this option here allows to define, okay, for any element in the category 0, they will now be assigned as elements in the category 1. But this is a little bit too advanced for us here. We're just gonna keep this option disabled, and we're gonna keep this empty. What we want to take away from this is we have a prefab that is used to display the task UI elements that we're going to define in a little bit. And then we have different categories, and for each category we pre-create a certain amount that we're going to use, and then we make sure that we are able to force the slot on each of these categories, so we can create our own organization of this. Yeah. Sound is great. Oh yeah. I figured it out. It was a little bit frustrating to not have the sound work as I expected last time when I wanted to do a stream on Thursday, but yeah, it's working really nicely now. Happy to have you here. Yeah, let's take a look at this task UI prefab real quick. We're using the one from the basic UI module. So when we open it here, we can see it's a simple Unity UI element. It has an image, it has a button component, it has an entity component task UI. And this is what component defines it as. Okay, this one is used to display tasks. So this component is required here, and we can assign an image component to it, which is the task icon right here. And that's a child object of this whole button, because we want to keep the button, and then on the button we want to have the icon of the task just on top of the button here. Coming back into the component task UI, so we have the task image icon component here, and then we have a tooltip, which is a description of the task that we're going to create in a little bit. This description of the task, we can choose whether we want it to be shown when we enter with our mouse into the task, or when we actually click on the task, when we're just like holding the mouse down. And for us, we want to have it at enter and exit. And the control label right here is each task is allowed to have a control type, which defines a key that allows to launch that task. And so we can have that control type shown as a text in this label component. Since we're using TextMesh Pro, we have the TextMesh Pro Text UI component. And so, for example, if our task to move is, we can click on M, for example, to start the task. We can have the M appear here instead of the A. But yeah, we're gonna keep the same default Task UI prefab that came with the basic UI module here. So yeah, that should work for our case right here. But in this case, you can customize how big the button is, what images do you have. Maybe you don't want this like backdrop of the button, you just want to have the task icon. So you can do whatever you want here. Sarukar asks, can you also delete their one category without problems? Let me see if I understood the question correctly. So you're talking about these categories here, right? And you want to know whether you can delete one of them without a problem. I mean, yeah, definitely you can delete one of them without a problem, but just make sure that in your tasks that you defined for the UI, they are not using these tasks categories right here. So you can delete these, and then you can create your own. You can add ones. You can have just one for all of your tasks. It's, yeah, you decide whatever you want here. But I'm just gonna keep them as they are. These are from the demo game, so it's not like you need to have 4 tasks or you need to have them in this formation. They are literally just components with a grid laid objects with a grid layout group. So they allow to organize the tasks in them easily. I hope that answered the questions. I'm not entirely sure I understood. If I didn't, let me know. But yeah. So now we've seen the task manager, how it handles awaiting tasks. We've seen the main UI components, and we've seen the component in the UI module that actually handles throwing the tasks for us, and the prefab that is used for drawing the actual tasks. Now let's go ahead and create our set target movement task for the worker unit. And for that, let's go back to the project view, go right click create, RTS Engine, and then we're gonna go ahead and create an entity component task UI. We're gonna call this live worker set target movement. All right. Let's make sure to copy that name and put it here in the code. You can have a different name, but make sure that the code is unique when it comes to all of the entity component task UIs that you have in your project. So we assign a unique code. We make sure that it's enabled so that it appears on the task panel. The display type, here we have the option to show a task when only one entity is selected that is using this task, or we can also show it when different entities that use the same task we can show the task on the task panel UI, even if we have different entity types, by selecting hetero multiple selection. But if we want to make sure that we only show the task when entities of the same type, say the worker type, are selected, then we can select the homo multiple selection. In the demo game, for example, the set target movement uses the hetero multiple selection because we can have units of different types that use the same set target task UI asset. And so no matter the type of the unit, we can just have the same task, and then they will all move to the destination that we choose. The icon for this task, we can choose one from the demo game. Maybe we can, I'm not sure which one has been used as the cursor here, so let me take a look at that. These tutorials aren't going to disappear, right? Oh no, they're not. So the VOD will be on Twitch for like a week, but usually during that week I will post these on YouTube. So the first live tutorial is now posted on YouTube, and then the plan is to chop them into smaller bits of tutorials and then upload them on YouTube in a playlist. So pretty much instead of going into in the manual and the documentation, you can just like have the same content there but in video format. So yeah, I will share with you the link for the last, yeah. So from the last stream there should be now there should be like 3 or 4 like smaller tutorials instead of like the 3-hour live thing, but there's only one at the moment, and the whole live thing is available there. But yeah, I'll be editing those and uploading them. Let me just, here's the link to the YouTube channel. This is the last live. So last live VOD is this one. And then this is an example of how they will be edited. Like this, yeah. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I wanted to start this live to, you know, it's fun to do. I can also do tutorials live and have you guys ask me questions, and I can also, you know, use the same recording that I have for the live and then make video tutorials out of it. So yeah, back to our task UI for moving the unit. We go back to the task here, which I just want to see which one we've used for the cursor, for the default one. Okay, so we used, all right, we used that one. So right now, when we go back, Gauntlet Gray, okay. So we're gonna use the other one, which is this one. So this is the icon that we're going to show in the task panel when the unit is selected. The panel category, we're gonna have it. So let's look at our panels again. We want to have it under miscellaneous here, which has the category of index 3. So it will be this one right here. And we go ahead and assign 3 right here. We want to also maybe force the slot. We want to probably have, go back here. We have 6 pre-created slots in the miscellaneous category. So we will have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So probably want to have it maybe at like the second one. So we go ahead and just like hit 1 and then force it right here. And that will make sure that we have that task at the same location every time. No matter what unit or building is used in that task, we have it at the same location. A tooltip, let's have one enabled. And let's say move units or units, since we allow this to be used for multiple units that are selected at the same time of same or different types. And we can hide the tooltip on click. Yes, we want, as soon as we click on the task, we can hide the tooltip. The reload time here doesn't matter. It's usually for tasks that require that, like creating units or launching upgrades. They would have a certain reload time, but for us this is irrelevant, so you can assign any value, doesn't matter. The cursor, since this is going to be an awaiting task, we're going to click on the task and then choose a position in the map to set as the target movement position. We're just gonna assign it to a probably the same task icon here, which is gonna be our cursor. So let's drag and drop that here. The hotspot, we can, depending on what texture or icon we use, it can have a different hotspot than the default one. So we can update that, but we're gonna keep it to 0, 0 here because it's not doesn't really matter that much. But you can have the hotspot maybe at one of the corners, so that at like right at the finger where it's actually clicking, it's gonna take that position to move the unit towards. But I think in the demo game I'm using the same icon, the same cursor, so I'm just gonna look there. Oh, okay, so it has a hotspot of 12 on X and 9 on Y. So let's just use those values since it has been already tested with those. And here for a control type, we can, for example, have a, you know what, let's go ahead and create like an example here. Okay, so we want to define a key that when it's clicked, it will also activate this awaiting task. And to do that, we need to assign a control type. So we cannot assign a key directly into the RTS engine. We can assign an asset, a scriptable object. So we go right click on the project view, create RTS engine, and then we go control type and say, let's say this is live worker set target movement control. Let's make sure our control type has a unique key, which we will set to live worker set target movement control. And then the default key that will trigger this control type, let's go ahead and set it to M, for example, on our keyboard. And enabling these control type will be by just holding or toggling. There's two modes to enable this key, but in our case we're going to use it for a task in the task panel. So as soon as that is clicked, it's gonna enable that task, and it's gonna be an awaiting task from which we can set a target position. And this enable type can work in different scenarios, in different RTS engine components where they require the control type to move from a state of being enabled to disabled, which is not the case here. So assigning whatever value here doesn't matter. But let's go back to our live worker here and then choose this one and hit save. Finally, we go back to our prefab, open our prefab, go back to the unit movement component and the set and target, and let's look for our, yes, this is the one that we've created. Hit save, go back here, and let's start the game. Come on, Unity. Unity is taking a little bit longer. Let's go. Waiting for Unity's code to finish executing. I think I probably need a better setup for handling the stream. But yeah, that's something for the future. Let's select our unit. And we can see here we have our task. When we hover over it, we see the tooltip description, we see the icon that we've set, and then we see the key here, M drawn. So let's go ahead and click. As soon as we click here, we can see our cursor has changed into the one that we've chosen, and then we left click somewhere in the map and our unit is moving there. Let's do this again, and our unit is moving there. Let's now go ahead and click on M in the keyboard, and as soon as we do, the cursor changes and we can pick a position to move the player at. So everything is working as expected, which is nice. Very, very, very nice. All right. Any questions, guys? While I take another sip of water. All right. I am wondering what to do next. I think it makes sense if we're following the documentation here. It makes sense to yeah, okay. We're gonna move on to the unit creator now. So we're gonna create that unit instead of having it placed by default. And for that, let's go back to the building we've created in the last live session, the town center. I should probably maybe rename this like the demo to live or something, so we can probably have a, the same naming conventions, but I'll probably do that before the next stream starts. Anyway, let's go ahead and open our building prefab. And in the building prefab, let's go to the building components and add a new component, the unit creator. Let's call this one unit creator. Let's make sure that we only have one unit creator here, and you can have multiple, but make sure to have different codes, unique codes for all of them. Have it active, and then when units are created, we want to create a unit spawn position. We're gonna have that object right here. Let's reset it, and then we want units to be placed here when they're created. So let's go ahead and drag and drop that right here, and then we move to the tasks prefab, and let's go ahead and create a task that is gonna allow us to create the unit. We're gonna call this create worker, and this task requires a entity component task UI asset, which is, so we're going to follow the same steps that we did to create the one that we used for setting the target movement. So go ahead, let's go back here, let's add a dedicated folder for our town center, and then let's create a right click on the project view, create RTS Engine, entity component task, live, create worker unit. Let's assign that unique code to it, make sure it's enabled. And in this case, we only want the task to appear when only this building is selected. So if we have multiple buildings or buildings and units selected together, we don't want to show that task. Next, we're gonna have an icon, which is gonna be the villager icon from the demo game. We're gonna have this in the panel category 1, and we're gonna have its index set to 0. We want this to appear at this as like the first task there. It's an important one. It's for creating the workers from the town center. That's what the town center classically or traditionally is in RTS games. And create a worker unit. In this description, we have the tooltip enabled. And here we don't really care about the cursor because it's not an awaiting task. As soon as we click, it's gonna, it's gonna be created. And for that, we need to have a reload time because creating the unit will take some time. Let's say 3. The real time is 3 seconds until the unit is created from the point we click at the task. And the control type, we're gonna have this one without a control type, but we can also assign one key that will trigger the creation of the unit when this building is selected. So this building right here has the unit creator component. We just created a task for that, and let's go ahead and assign it right here. And the same task, we can define what factions are allowed to use this task. So when we have a building type that can be used across many faction types, we can determine that different tasks appear for the same building but when using different faction types. For us, irrelevant, we'll keep it like this. We also don't have any resource types defined, so we're just gonna keep this empty right here. Faction entity requirements here are in relation to we can give them a specific name, for example, which is gonna be for the UI, or a specific icon, but they usually mean, okay, you want to create a new unit, but we need to make sure that certain other entities, faction entities, are created in the game. And for that, maybe an example, we can only create a worker if there's another worker, which is, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can just like worker requirement, and then you can assign the code of the worker, or you can use the categories here to assign like the requirement, and then we assign the amount to 1, so we can only have a worker and create and use this task only if there's another worker. But we're not going to be using that, so let's go ahead and delete this faction requirement. The missing requirement data. So if we have assigned resources or faction entity requirements and we do not meet those resources or requirements, we can display a different icon or sprite for the task in the task panel, or we can simply display the same task if we don't have the icon here assigned, the same icon that is defined in the entity component task UI, but then we can assign a different color that's going to be overlaid on top of it, so something like red, for example. And we click save. And then what is the prefab that we're going to create? And that would be our worker prefab. As for the squad data here, the unit creation tasks allow you to create squads of unit, which when you click one of them, you click all of them, and then you can always move them together. For us, we're gonna have this option disabled. We'll probably get back to the squad system at a later tutorial. As for the limit here, let's say we want to limit the creation of this unit type created using this task. And so we can, for example, have this task allowed to be launched only 3 times by assigning the limit type to launch times and then the max amount to 3. So even if we have that worker already pre-placed, it's going to allow us to create 3 more workers. But if we set the limit to active instances and we have that worker pre-initialized in the map, and we set the max amount to 3, we can only create 2 new additional workers using this task because there is one already there. So let's have this limit right here assigned to 3, and we're gonna test that later. And yeah, the creation tasks are done. As for the upgrade target creation tasks, these are also similar creation tasks. They have the similar fields, but these are tasks that will replace some of the creation tasks when one of the unit that is corresponding to that creation task is upgraded. So say we upgrade the worker unit to like a much more powerful worker unit, we need to define a creation task for that much more powerful worker unit, which after the upgrade is done, this creation task right here is going to get deleted, and it's going to be replaced by the one in the upgrade target creations. But we're going to get back to this when we're handling with upgrades. For now, we're just going to keep it empty. All right. Another important addition that we need to have for our building is that right now we have a unit creator component, and that requires to have pending tasks or progress tasks, which means we launch the task and then there's a timer that goes through, and that timer will go through, and then only then will the unit will be created. But in order for a entity to be able to handle pending tasks, we need to add a pending tasks handler. And this component simply has one field, and it's called the max count. So how many pending tasks at the same time can we actually have running for our building? So for this example, we can have them assigned to 4. So as I said, the creation of the unit starts with clicking on that task. Then we will have a pending task. We will have a timer that runs, and when the timer is completely done, it's going to create the unit. For the UI of the pending task, we actually use a different handler component. So when we go back to our map scene, we go to the basic UI. Let's look for the pending task panel UI handler. So this panel right here is where we will have the pending tasks appear right here next to the selection. So when we have an entity selection that has tasks that are pending and running, that are in progress, they're going to appear here in this grid layout group. And one thing about pending tasks, they only appear when there is one entity selected. So we have multiple entities selected. We cannot see what each entity has as its pending tasks. They're only appearing for one selection. So that's the parent of the tasks that we're going to showcase. We have a pre-created amount of 6. So there's the same logic here of pre-creating the tasks before they're actually used, in order to not have that FPS drop whenever we create like a UI element during the runtime. And we're going to create 6 of what? 6 of these task UI prefabs that we can open right here. So like the regular task prefab, this one also has like an image, a backdrop for the button, a button that we can click on, and it has an entity component pending task UI. And it also has a field for assigning an image for which the icon of the pending task will appear. So in our case, this child object right here, the task icon. It also has a tooltip that we can enable by entering or exiting with a pointer, or by clicking, by holding down. And it also has a progress bar. A progress bar here is used to showcase the progress or the time until the pending task is completely done. So we have how the bar will be looking when it's full, and how the bar will be looking when it's empty. So it's gonna start empty. So it's gonna start looking like this. And then as soon as it starts getting full and the timer is running, we're gonna see it move like this until it hits there, and then the unit is created. And when clicking on this pending task, we will notice later that we can cancel the creation of the unit. We can cancel the pending task by clicking on it. So yeah, we'll be testing that in a little bit. All right, so now we have our unit creator set up. Let's go back here. We have our unit creator set up. It has its creation task. It has its spawn position. And we made sure that this building is allowed to have pending tasks. That's all great. And we took a look at the pendant task UI handlers and how they work and the prefab used for that. And now let's go ahead and create and start the game and test this out. Water is very important, guys. Very important. All right. When we select our town center building, we can see we have a task here at the slot and the category that we actually assigned it at. And it says create a worker unit. And it shows us also the description of the worker unit right afterwards. When clicking on this, wait. Yeah, wait, I'm gonna redo this test because I want to use it for the tutorial later, and I just used the selection box right now and deselected everything, which I didn't want to have in the tutorial later. So stick with me, guys. It's gonna be fast. I mean, as long as Unity is loading this scene very fast. All right. Test take 2. We select our building. We go ahead and see that we have a task in the task panel at the category we chose and at the index we chose. That is forced. And as soon as we click on this task, we can see it's now in the pendant task panel, and we can see the timer has run through, and we're now able to move the unit. It has been created. A new worker unit has been created. We can also go ahead here and try to click create multiple ones, and then we can disable them by clicking on the pendant tasks associated to them. And you can see that as soon as we create 2 here, this one turns red and we're not able to create any new instances. And it's because, if you remember, during the creation of these during the creation of the unit creator component inside of the building, we've set it to have a maximum of 3 at lunch times, and so we're only allowed to create 3 of these entities right here. So yeah, right now we can see that the entities can be moved together. We probably need to change some stuff about their radius so that they're not grouped very closely together, but that's just a setting that we can choose in the unit prefab. We can also see that this set target movement task is created for all of these units, and so as soon as we click on this right here and click somewhere in the map, they're moving towards that position, which is nice. All right. Any questions so far, guys? In the meantime, I'm gonna play with the radius of the worker unit to see if I can have these units move spaced out. Maybe we wanna have 0.8 here, and in that case we can just increase this to include maybe the hammer. Yeah, I think that makes more sense if the hammer is included a little bit, because we don't want the hammer to be like, yeah. Or maybe yeah, all right, let's keep it this way. Also, something else that I wanted to check was, I'm not sure whether we set the limit to the launch times or the active instances. So let me check that. Okay, active instances, and it's supposed to be set at 3. Okay, so that's probably a bug. Let me just note this down. lunch times limit on unit creation is using active instances. And I will investigate this later. All right, let's go ahead and see if our new radius now has an effect on the created unit. Well, the selection renderer is big now. Let's create 3 more. Alright, they're not as close as they used to be, which is good. Alrighty. This is nice. Nice. Okay. So, any questions so far, guys? I think I still have one thing to do for this live tutorial, and we will be done. So if you have any questions, so please ask them. Now, we are able to create our unit that moves freely and, so smoothly in the game. But when we create the units, we might wanna not have them all be at the same spawn point. We might wanna allow the units, as soon as they're created, to go to a different position. And that can be done with the Rallypoint component. So the Rallypoint component, we go ahead into our town center building, and then we add the Rallypoint component to it. And we can say, hey, Rallypoint, give that a unique code within our entity components. We make it active. This one will probably need a task UI, but in this case, we can probably just use the, instead of creating another one, we can probably just use the task UI from the demo game. So let's go ahead and use this one right here, since we now know how to create entity component task UI assets. The Rallypoint actually allows to set a position as a Rallypoint. It can set a resource so that worker units, for example, that can collect resources can immediately spawn and then start collecting resources. And it can also have a building as a target, so that as soon as the units spawn, they can start constructing that building. Or if the units are attack units and then the Rallypoint is on an enemy building, they will spawn and start attacking that building. So whatever interaction the spawned unit has with the target entity, it will start doing that. And here we have settings for if we have, for example, a target resource that is set as our Rallypoint and that target resource is depleted, enabling this setting will allow the Rallypoint to automatically be set to a different resource entity but of the same type within the range defined here. So very useful option. I'm gonna keep it. And let's take a look at our Rallypoint right here. So when the Rallypoint is assigned to a resource or a building, it doesn't really matter, because as soon as we click on our building that has the Rallypoint, it will flash us the target building or entity. But if it's assigned to a position in the map, we need some visual indication of that position. So we need to create an object here that allows us to be indicate the Rallypoint. I think I have something from the demo game. For that case, let me go ahead and maybe load the town center from the demo game. I'm gonna unpack this prefab completely, and gonna look for, is this only, oh, this is the model. My bad. I'm gonna have the town center here. I'm gonna unpack it completely. Yes. And then I should have a rally point here. Yes, I'm gonna drag this one out here. I'm gonna delete this one. And this is my rally point. Just gonna reset it. So yeah, we can use this rally point that I have from the demo game. And for this rally point, we can also, yeah, all right, size is correct. So we'll be using this rally point from the demo game. We're gonna go back to our rally point component. We're gonna drag and drop this. And this is gonna be the default position of our rally point, the one that we're going to set here. So our spawn point is here, and as soon as they spawn, they're gonna move closely here. All right, and we can make sure that the rally point is only usable on, or only placeable on, certain terrain areas. We're gonna choose our terrain that we created for this tutorial. And then we can also forbid the repositioning of the rally point into a different terrain area. And in this case, we don't have any other terrain areas defined here, so we will keep this list empty. As for the forced terrain areas, it's that's the forced position, the forced initial position of the rally point that can be used. Yeah. Otherwise, the max distance enabled. So when we enable this option, we can only have the rally point within a certain radius of the building that is attached to. We are gonna keep this option disabled. And when we enable this option here, and we're placing the building actively into the map. Let's say on one border of the building there's a different terrain area than the one that is forced in the forced terrain areas list. Enabling this option will allows us to reposition the terrain, the default position of the go-to transform of the rally point as soon as it's created. So during the placement, you can see the rally point object is moving to find a valid target position. And when we enable this attack move option, then when we create attack units that spawn from this building, for example, and then they use this rally point towards a certain position, having this option enabled will allow those units to stop on their way to the rally point position and attack enemy units if they sense any at their range, and then continue moving to the rally point if they survive. All right, this is our rally point component created. Let's go ahead and test it out. Come on, Unity. Let's go ahead and select our building. As we can see, as soon as we select the building, we have the rally point object here, and we can reposition the rally point object by right-clicking on the map, but it also comes with its own task UI, so we can just like click here and then we can see the cursor change and we can reposition it anywhere. And let's go ahead and create our units and see how they behave when they spawn. Oh, they're moving. We reposition the rally point, they're moving there. We reposition the rally point and it's moving there. So yeah, this is pretty much the rally point component and what it does. We're gonna take a look at the manual right here. I think today we went through creating a new unit, setting up the unit movement, adding the unit to the map, handling the movement task, setting up the unit creator, and setting up a rally point. So that's like the second section, the whole section of the units in the manual. So that's really nice. A lot of video tutorials will be coming out of this one, so that's amazing. Otherwise, I think in the next stream, which probably is gonna be next weekend, we're gonna be looking at how to place buildings and construct buildings. And then maybe in the stream afterwards, we're gonna look at resources. And yeah, I think we can have, yeah, a lot of potential in these live stream, guys. But yeah, do you guys maybe have any questions regarding the unit creation, rally points, units in general? Gonna have a cinematic view of these units right here. Because otherwise I think I've hit the target time for this stream actually, which is 2 hours, and there's nothing else to do at the moment but end the stream. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for everyone who came through in the stream today. Next stream is gonna be about placing buildings and constructing them. And yeah, we're gonna have a bunch of video tutorials coming out from this stream, and I'm gonna be posting the links on Discord. And if you have specific requests for these live tutorials, you can, send them to me through Discord. Otherwise, yeah, thank you so much for being here, and have a great night or day depending on where you are, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.